In the words of Yuri Bezmenov, I was engaged in something much more unpleasant than espionage. I was engaged in ideological subversion. Meet Yuri Bezmenov, a man who was as enigmatic as he was insightful. A former Soviet KGB propaganda agent, Bezmenov was deeply embedded within the intricate lattice of Cold War espionage and ideological warfare. But, in a twist of fate, he defected to Canada in the year 1970. Here he shed light on the convoluted and clandestine processes of national subversion employed by the USSR against its international targets. His revelations, although shrouded in the fog of history, continue to echo in our present, illuminating our understanding of ideological warfare. His life, his defection, and his subsequent revelations are a testament to the complexities of ideological subversion, a theme we will explore further. In the following scenes we'll delve deeper into the life of Bezmenov, his defection, and the revelations he made. Yuri Bezmenov was born in 1939 in the Soviet Union. Born into an intellectual family, his father was a high-ranking officer in the Red Army, and his mother was a journalist. His upbringing was steeped in the ideology of the Soviet regime, a world that he would later turn his back on. Young Bezmenov was a bright and curious student, eager to absorb knowledge. His intelligence didn't go unnoticed, and he was recruited into the ranks of the KGB while still in his 20s. His job? To spread the Soviet ideology and to subvert the minds of people in other countries. Bezmenov was no ordinary spy. He was an ideological soldier, a propaganda agent, and a master manipulator. He was given the code name Tomas Schumann, and his mission was to infiltrate foreign societies, not with guns and bombs, but with ideas and beliefs. Bezmenov was good at what he did, but as he delved deeper into his work, a seed of disillusionment began to sprout. He saw the Soviet regime for what it was, a machine that crushed individuality and freedom, all while presenting itself as a beacon of progress and equality. Bezmenov began to question the very ideology he was tasked to spread, and his heart grew heavy with the weight of his actions. He found himself at a crossroads, torn between his duty to his country and his growing unease with the Soviet regime. The same sharp mind that had made him such an effective agent of the KGB was now opening his eyes to the harsh realities of the system he was part of. Finally, the day came when he could no longer ignore the voice of his conscience. The ideological soldier, the master manipulator, the faithful servant of the Soviet Union, made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. In 1970, Bezmenov took a drastic step. He defected to Canada. He left behind his life in the Soviet Union and embarked on a new journey, one that would lead him to become one of the most vocal critics of the very system he once served. Leaving behind his life in the USSR, Bezmenov embarked on a new journey in Canada. This wasn't a simple decision, nor was it one made lightly. Bezmenov was part of the KGB, the Soviet Union's main security agency, involved in activities that were deeply unsettling to him. His work, he claimed, was more than just espionage. It was ideological subversion. Imagine being part of a process that systematically and purposefully undermined the values and beliefs of other nations. That was Bezmenov's reality, and it was a reality he could no longer bear. He decided to defect, a decision fraught with danger and uncertainty. Defectors were not looked upon kindly by the Soviet Union, and there was always the risk of being hunted down. But for Bezmenov, the risk was worth it. He was ready to leave behind his old life, his old identity, and take a leap into the unknown. Bezmenov landed in Canada in 1970, trading the cloak and dagger world of the KGB for a quieter, safer existence. But he wasn't content to simply let his past stay buried. He had seen firsthand the damage that ideological subversion could do, and he felt a responsibility to expose it. So, he adopted a pseudonym, Tomas Schumann, and began speaking out about his experiences. He detailed the tactics used by the USSR to subvert foreign nations. Tactics that were as insidious as they were effective. He spoke of the long, slow process of changing a nation's perception of reality, a process that was happening right out in the open. But Bezmenov's mission went beyond just exposing these tactics. He wanted to educate people, to make them aware of the ways in which they could be manipulated. He wanted to arm them with knowledge so that they could protect themselves, their families, and their communities. Bezmenov wasn't just content to start anew. He had a mission to expose the USSR's subversion tactics. And in doing so, he left an indelible mark on history, a mark that continues to resonate with us today. Bezmenov began to share his knowledge about the USSR's ideological subversion and psychological warfare tactics. He painted a picture of a silent and sinister war, fought not with weapons but with ideas, manipulation, and subversion. Bezmenov's revelations illuminated a four-step framework for ideological subversion, a strategy meticulously deployed by the USSR around the world. The first stage, demoralization, was a long game, taking anywhere from 15 to 20 years. This was the time it took to educate a generation. Bezmenov explained that a significant part of this process involved the infiltration of educational institutions, media, and governance by those sympathetic to the cause of the subverting nation, whether consciously or unconsciously. To the surprise of the USSR, Bezmenov claimed, this phase was relatively easy to accomplish in the United States. Following the demoralization came the second stage, destabilization. This was a shorter phase, typically lasting between 2 to 5 years. The focus here was on three major areas: foreign relations, defense, and economy. The intention was to create a state of instability within the target nation, shaking the foundation upon which it stood. The third stage, crisis, was the shortest yet most intense. Lasting about 6 weeks, this phase aimed to create a state of chaos, a climatic turning point that would rattle the very core of the targeted society. The existing order would crumble, making way for the fourth and final stage of the subversion process. Normalization was the final phase. The term normalization was a euphemism for a new status quo, often involving a military takeover. Bezmenov described this phase as the moment when the subverting nation would seize control, and the reality of the target society would be irrevocably changed. These stages of subversion were not enacted in secret, but out in the open. The sheer audacity of this process was part of its genius. It was a slow, methodical breakdown of a nation's identity, carried out in such a way that it seemed almost natural, inevitable. Bezmenov's revelations showed that the USSR's strategy was not just about espionage or military might, it was about changing the perception of reality, about leading people to question their values, their beliefs, and their understanding of the world. Bezmenov's revelations were a wake-up call, a chilling insight into the methods used to undermine and destabilize nations. His words serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of societies and the subtle yet powerful ways in which they can be manipulated and subverted. As we move forward, it is crucial that we remember Bezmenov's lessons, that we stay vigilant, and that we never underestimate the power of ideological subversion. Yuri Bezmenov passed away in 1993, but his words continue to resonate. His cautionary tales of ideological subversion and the manipulation techniques used by Soviet intelligence during the Cold War have taken on a prophetic quality in recent years, with echoes of his warnings audible in the discourse of our present-day societies. Many find Bezmenov's insights eerily prescient, and his interviews are often revisited during periods of crisis. They serve as a stark reminder of the potential vulnerability of free societies to ideological manipulation and subversion. In an era of information overload, Bezmenov's message about the danger of distorted perceptions of reality, despite the abundance of information, feels particularly relevant. The simplicity of Bezmenov's four-step framework for ideological subversion on a national scale, as practiced by the USSR, is also striking. He outlined a process of intentional directional change that happens out in the open, with the greater openness of some societies making them susceptible to this process. This straightforward framework has been studied and analyzed by scholars and experts in the field of psychological warfare and international relations. However, it's important to note that opinions on Bezmenov's predictions vary. Some view his theories as the ramblings of a Cold War-era defector, while others see in them a blueprint for understanding the ideological battles of the present day. Regardless of where one stands on this spectrum of belief, Bezmenov's interviews continue to spark dialogue and debate. His warnings about the infiltration of educational institutions, media, and governance to spread ideological propaganda, and the weakening of the moral fabric of Western societies, resonate with many who see parallels with current societal and political challenges. They serve as a reminder of the importance of critical thinking and the safeguarding of democratic values. Yuri Bezmenov's warnings about ideological subversion serve as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of free societies, a cautionary tale that continues to echo in our times.